I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. And this is Currents. Gay marriage is back in California. We'll look at what it may mean for the rest of the country. A Currents exclusive. A leading American Cardinal talks with us about the future of Iraq. And we'll take a look at a surprisingly common moral dilemma.
For something not to be sinful really means that I'm not touching at all that evil and I have nothing to do with it.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. The back and forth over gay marriage continues as a judge in California yesterday overturned Proposition 8, which banned marriage for same-sex couples in that state.
Gay marriage had been legal in California for less than 5 months before voters approved Prop 8 in November 2008. Yesterday's decision, though, paves the way for same-sex marriages there to resume. But we get details now from CNN's Megan Hughes.
Gay marriage supporters celebrated in the streets from San Francisco to San Diego.
We've been waiting for this decision for quite some time.
In his 136-page opinion, Judge Vaughn Walker, who was appointed to the federal bench by former President Ronald Reagan, says California's ban on gay marriage violated constitutional rights to equal protection and due process.
You lost!
Supporters of Prop 8 argue the ruling is a slap in the face to the 52% of California voters who approved the ban back in 2008.
If the voters say no, then that's who should decide, not a federal judge.
The decision isn't just stoking the debate around the country, it also could have implications for other states. Chuck Donovan is a researcher at the Conservative Heritage Foundation.
Well, it's certainly the most sweeping federal court decision to date to intervene on the question of the definition of marriage, which has always been reserved to legislative judgment by Congress in the states.
Proposition 8 backers are appealing, and both sides believe the case will reach the U.S. Supreme Court. If it does, the court's ruling could overturn same-sex marriage bans in other states. The plaintiffs in the case say it's the fight of this generation.
But this trial did more than expose that false logic. It embraced the fundamental American values of freedom and fairness.
For now, this victory is largely symbolic. The judge immediately issued a stay on his decision, so same-sex weddings in California are still on hold.
And that is CNN's Megan Hughes reporting. Well, the U.S. bishops criticized yesterday's ruling. In a statement conference, President Cardinal Francis George said marriage between a man and a woman is the bedrock of any society. He added it's tragic that a federal judge would overturn the clear and expressed will of the people.
The National Organization for Marriage also put out their own statement reacting to the ruling. To talk more about it now, we're joined by the organization's president, Brian Brown. Brian, thank you so much for joining us here today on Currents. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
First of all, sir, just quickly, your reaction to this judge's ruling yesterday.
Outrageous, but not unexpected, given the way Judge Walker has conducted this entire trial as a circus and his complete bias at every stage. It's not unexpected, but I think this will be a Pyrrhic victory for supporters of same-sex marriage. The ruling is so far-reaching, it doesn't just touch on California, which would be bad enough because you're essentially depriving the civil rights of 7 million Californians who voted for Prop 8, but it affects every single state in the country, potentially, because it claims that there is a U.S. constitutional right to redefine marriage, and that's just wrong, and I think the Supreme Court is going to see through what Walker has done, and I don't think this decision is going to stand.
Well, you sort of were starting to get into this, Brian. What are the implications here for the rest of the country, and especially in states like Massachusetts, where already there have been some recent moves, seemingly along the lines of what California has just done?
Well, the recent decision in Massachusetts only had to do with the Federal Defense of Marriage Act and one part of it. This is much more far-reaching. If this decision stands, it would upend the marriage laws of 45 states throughout the country, and 30 of those states have had direct votes on marriage, and it would deprive the civil rights of the voters who stood up and said marriage is the union of a man and a woman. But this is the beginning of the battle, not the end. On Friday, there will be a hearing on a stay of the decision, so most likely there will be a stay issued, if not by Judge Walker, then by the Ninth Circuit, and so you won't have same-sex marriages occurring immediately. what this decision does do is nationalize the same-sex marriage issue. It will have ramifications for the 2010 and 2012 elections, and also it'll have an effect on what happens in Congress. Ultimately, Congress can supersede the courts. If it chooses to, there could be a vote on a U.S. constitutional amendment to define marriage in this country as the union of a man and a woman. We support that. There's work to do to get the political will to make that happen, but I think that that will appear should the Supreme Court decide to impose same-sex marriage on the entire country.
In his ruling yesterday, Brian, Chief District U.S. Judge Vaughn Walker said, and I'll get your reaction to this, he said Proposition 8 fails to advance any rational basis in singling out gay men and lesbians for denial of a marriage license. He also said the evidence shows Proposition 8 does nothing more than enshrine in the California Constitution the notion that opposite-sex couples are superior to same-sex couples. What's your reaction to that statement?
Well, essentially what Judge Walker has done is ruled that the majority of Americans are the equivalent of bigots. We know that that's wrong. It's not bigoted to stand up for the unique institution of marriage. People understand that there's something unique and special about unions of husbands and wives that's different than any other type of union. And the fact that Walker has ruled in this way and ruled so broadly, I think in the end will undermine his case. The grandiosity of Judge Walker's ruling is itself what will undermine it eventually in the courts.
Well, Brian, one of the other things written by the federal court was that the evidence shows that the rights of those opposed to homosexuality or same-sex couples will remain unaffected if the state ceases to enforce Proposition 8. So, in a way, the argument being postulated here is why should it matter to people that aren't directly affected? But you would argue that, of course, you are.
Of course we are. I mean, this is an argument with no merit. We know what the consequences of same-sex marriage are. We can only look to Massachusetts and other states. Having children taught as young as first grade that when you grow up, it's the same thing to grow up and marry a boy as to marry a girl, and that your parents bigots if they teach otherwise is a direct consequence and threat to parental rights. Having Catholic Charities Adoption Agency in Boston shut down because it would not adopt children to same-sex couples according to its religious beliefs is a profound attack on religious liberty. In New Jersey, we saw the New Jersey Ocean Grove Methodist Association lose part of its state tax exemption because it would not use a pavilion it owned for same-sex civil unions. The list goes on and on. There are profound consequences for redefining marriage. Any two people in this country have the right to live as they choose. They don't have the right to redefine marriage for the rest of us.
Well, Brian Brown, president of the National Organization for Marriage, thank you so much for taking some time out today to talk to us, sir. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Well, of course, we've certainly not heard the end of this story. Be sure to stay with Currents for all the latest news.
Well, we have much more on tonight's program. Just ahead, we'll have the rest of the day's headlines, including a new effort to stop the controversial mosque near Ground Zero. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, is it ever okay to cooperate with evil? A surprisingly tough question, and we'll get the answer.
But first, let's turn to the day's headlines. A conservative legal group filed a lawsuit Wednesday which could once again stall plans to build a controversial Islamic community center and mosque 2 blocks from the site of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. On Tuesday, the city's Landmarks Preservation Commission denied landmark status for a building currently on the site, clearing the way for construction of the Cordoba House. But the American Center for Law and Justice filed a lawsuit in New York State Supreme Court Wednesday seeking to halt construction plans. An ACLJ spokesman says the group believes the commission, quote, rushed a decision without a full and fair public hearing and public debate. Developers say the center will contain a 9/11 memorial and will be used to promote tolerance and understanding. The oil may have stopped flowing from the blown-out well pipe in the Gulf of Mexico, but fishermen, their families, and communities along the coast are still struggling. And so are the Catholic Church's efforts to help them. Catholic Charity says it is running out of money to help Gulf Coast residents recover from the spill's effects. Reports say the group has helped nearly 20,000 people for 90 days so far, but its funds are almost gone. Catholic Charities New Orleans has provided food, diapers, mental health counseling, and other services with the help of private donations and some funds from BP. However, the aid costs over $100,000 a week. A spokesman for the church-affiliated group says they will continue helping oil spill victims, and he believes supporters locally and nationally will come to the rescue. Catholic Charities New Orleans is taking donations on its website. You can find more information out on our website about that on currentsny.net.
Well, if you're looking for a way to make some money to send to Catholic Charities, maybe you're thinking of selling some personal belongings. One thing you might not consider a big-ticket item is an old family Bible. Well, a bookseller in Utah is putting one of his clients' Bibles up for sale at the staggering price of $1.5 million. That's because he says it was originally owned by the founder of the Mormon Church. John Hollenhorst has the story.
At Ken Sanders Rare Books, this is one item they do not keep out on the shelves. It's locked up in a safe, as befits a book that may be worth a fortune. Ken Sanders is looking for a buyer. He's selling it on consignment. This 1831 edition has everything you'd find in any copy of the Bible.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
But this is no ordinary copy.
Here's the Joseph Smith family genealogy.
Sanders says the handwriting has been authenticated as that of Joseph Smith Jr. and his wife Emma.
It is in fact unique. It's the only copy in the world, the family Bible belonging to the founder of Mormonism and his first wife, Emma Hale Smith.
Sanders says Joseph Smith purchased the Bible when he lived in Kirtland, Ohio. It was one of the few possessions the family kept as they fled mobs in Ohio, then in Missouri, and after Smith's murder in Illinois in 1844.
Over the decades, there's been an enormous amount of research and genealogy and into the provenance of the book, and it's rock solid.
Sanders provided an ownership statement showing it was handed down through generations of Emma Hale Smith descendants until in 1979 it was purchased by Buddy Younggreen. Younggreen is not a member of the Smith family, but he's been instrumental in bringing Smith descendants together in recent decades. He told us he sold the Bible to an anonymous buyer 15 years ago. Sanders agreed to maintain anonymity for the current owner.
The book is being sold by the family for financial considerations, and in this economy, everybody needs the money.
In a written statement, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints said, "We have known of this Bible's existence, but have not been involved with determining its authenticity and have no current plans to attempt to purchase it."
I have absolutely no question of the provenance of this particular book and its authenticity.
That is John Hollenhorst reporting in Salt Lake City, Utah. And finally, there was snow in August today in Rome. No, it wasn't real snow. It was flower petals falling from the ceiling of a famous church. We get details now from Rome Reports.
St. Mary Major, one of the prime basilicas of Rome, appeared in all its grandeur today to mark its special feast. According to an ancient tradition, on the 5th of August in the year 358, snow covered the Esquiline Hill. The event was foretold in a vision Pope Liberius had of the Virgin Mary, who told him to build a basilica at that place the snow appeared. That marked the origins of the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Since that time, every August 5th, the Basilica hosts the celebration of the Miracle of the Snows. During the Gloria at the celebration of Mass, a cascade of white flower petals fall in memory of that day, and the Esquiline Hill was found to be snow-covered despite the August heat of Rome. The celebration marks one of the more unique celebrations in the Eternal City.
Former Boston Archbishop Cardinal Bernard Law celebrated that Mass. Cardinal Law resigned as head of the church in Boston in 2004 amid the clergy sex abuse scandal. He now serves as archpriest of the Basilica of St. Mary Major.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents coming up.
When we return, are America's plans in Iraq enough? In a Currents exclusive, a U.S. Cardinal shares his thoughts. President Obama announced earlier this week that most U.S. troops would be leaving Iraq by the end of this month. And that will leave as few as 50,000 troops there to advise the country's military and to protect U.S. interests as well.
But at least one American Cardinal is asking whether our country is doing enough to help Iraq's refugees recover from 7 years of war. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick is the retired Archbishop of Washington. On the website Politics Daily, he wrote that the U.S. needs to work with the Iraqi government as well as the international community to come up with a plan to help Iraq's displaced people.
Cardinal McCarrick compares it to the Marshall Plan, which helped rebuild Europe following World War II. I had a chance to talk a little bit more about all of this with him by phone yesterday. Cardinal McCarrick, thank you so much for joining us here on Currents today. We really appreciate you taking some time out to join us, sir.
No, I'm happy to do it, and what we're discussing is very important.
Well, yes, it is. As a matter of fact, you know, as I'm sure you're very aware, President Obama has made a speech here just very recently talking about the drawdown of troops from Iraq. And you wrote an article recently for Politics Daily in which you said that the end of our military presence there should not be the end of our dealings with Iraq, and that there is a mission still to be done. Tell me a little bit about what was in that article.
Well, basically, as we know, the president has established his timetable. We will be drawing down our troops there. Most of them are going to be just in training Iraqi police and soldiers. But my fear is that, you know, when out of sight, out of mind, and we may forget that because of the war there, we have left a situation in Iraq which is very, very difficult for the people. There are more than 1 million refugees outside of Iraq, and probably an equal number within Iraq. The displaced people away from their homes, trying to make do, trying to find jobs, trying to find enough to keep their families going, trying to find food and protection and everything. And outside of Iraq, there are these people who may or may not try to go back. I think most of them will not come back. Yeah. And so I think we can't walk away from that, because whether it was the right thing to do or not is not the question. We may, and please God, we will be able to stop our military involvement, but we can't stop the humanitarian involvement.
Right, there's still a great need there, and which begs the question, who should be responsible for providing that humanitarian aid? Should it be the U.S. military, or should it be some other entity?
Well, that's really a question for the politicians, and not for bishops who are concerned about people. All we can do is say, don't forget this. This is something you've got to do. You've got to take care of your neighbor. Your neighbor is not just the family that lives across the street. Your neighbor's the family that lives across the world.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, and in that speech that President Obama gave, that I had sort of started out this interview here by talking about, the president said, we'll maintain a transitional force until we remove all of our troops from Iraq by the end of next year. Forces will have a focused mission supporting and training Iraqi forces, doing counterterrorism, that sort of thing. So that mission is really different from what you're talking about here. Some people might say, well, we're still going to be there, but they won't really be doing a lot of the humanitarian things as so much as they will be training and trying to stabilize the Iraqi military force.
Exactly, Matt. And the real key to it is many of these Iraqis are not in Iraq. That there's more than 1 million, maybe 1.5 million of them in different places. And the majority of them in Syria. A great number of them, maybe 500,000 in Jordan, and a smaller number, but still a substantial number, in Lebanon. And so that our withdrawal from Iraq is one thing, and our taking care of the displaced people in Iraq is another very important thing. But the third thing is the Iraqis who have left that country because of the war, because of the invasion, because of the problems, and because the situation, the social situation in that land has been changed so much, a lot of people are afraid to go back.
What can the church do to help make the situation in Iraq better going down the road?
Well, the church is suffering there, but many of its people are gone. There is a revived discrimination against Christians, maybe even in some areas persecution, and that's something that our church is going to have to live with. Now, I think that it's up to our country and others to try to make sure that the Iraqi Constitution, which does now call for freedom of religion, is going to be observed. And if there is persecution of anyone, and I think of the Catholics or Jews or Baha'i or someone like that, then the world has to say, you can't do that. We know that we screwed up your economy, but you still can't treat people without human dignity.
All right, well, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on Currents today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. God bless you.
Thanks. Glad to have him as part of the show. And if you want to read more about Cardinal McCarrick's thoughts on Iraq, just go to our website. It's currentsny.net. Click on our blog, Riding the Wave. We posted a link there to his complete article.
Stay tuned. There's much more Currents straight ahead. Just ahead, the good, the bad, and the in-between.
I'm against abortion, however, that's my personal opinion, and then they vote differently.
Finally tonight, right and wrong, good and evil. Is there always a clear distinction between it? Might not be such an easy answer, and back in the spring, a forum in Queens provided plenty of discussion and some answers.
Thought-provoking. It was all part of the Catholic Speakers Series at St. Robert Bellarmine Parish, and the subject was cooperating with evil.
The man, for instance, paying for his girlfriend's abortion. The abortion will take place inside the clinic, but the man pays for it. He supports it. He would be a person we would speak of as guilty of cooperation in sin.
The Joint Parish Respect Life Committee sponsors Father Haggerty from the New York Archdiocese. He's a professor of moral theology to discuss the topic of Catholic teaching on cooperation in evil, ways that we possibly unintentionally cooperate in evil and intentionally cooperate in evil.
For something not to be sinful really means that I'm not touching at all that evil, that something is taking place, that I'm very remotely distant from it, and I have nothing to do with it. What about the question of a Catholic pro-life politician voting for a law that would, this law would permit public funding for abortions? It's a useful example, and we're in Queens, so maybe we can use the example, but if you remember Governor Cuomo as governor here in New York, he had at times, at least one time, and maybe more than one time, he had a bill before him passed by a Republican legislature that would have limited abortions. And as governor, he vetoed those bills. That would be a type of immediate material cooperation. I think some of the bishops have to be a little more forceful, particularly with the Catholic politicians who for the last 30 or so years have been getting a free ride that started with the famous I'm against abortion, however, that's my personal opinion, and then they vote differently. At this point, strong actions would be a very helpful teaching tool for the Catholic Church. Strong, what is an excommunication in history? It was to say that you are out of communion with the Church when you perform egregious acts of that nature. And we've been very concerned with politically correct actions in the political realm, what would happen as repercussions. I would not have a problem, I'm only a small priest here, but I would not have a problem with stronger actions in that realm.
The individuals who are here who participated, they would love to hear more from our priests, from our bishops, from our cardinals, from the church hierarchy. It's so important because we need that confidence, that reassurance, and we need their word.
I find that so fascinating, the nuances of, are you in some way participating, as we were saying in the introduction, in evil in some way, shape, or form, or in some kind of behavior that you may not be fully aware that you're participating in?
Yeah, it's almost like the concept of, you know, somebody robbing a bank and then somebody else driving the getaway car. You know, it's like that person cooperated with what they were doing even though they didn't hold up the bank, you know? So it was, it's like an accomplice sort of a thing.
Well, when I was in Florida, I helped endeavor the first curbside recycling program in Pensacola and Escambia County. They hadn't had one before, and it's still in place today, which is great. And half the time here in New York, I still find myself using plastic bags, for example, at the grocery store, instead of taking the ones that I can reuse. And that's, I know, for example, one of those things that I know isn't helping the environmental situation, and yet at the same time, it's something that I haven't yet corrected.
It's almost like force of habit, you know, where you just kind of, just put it in the plastic bag and move on. But you know, there's kind of something else that you could do that might be a little bit better. So yeah, that's another example where something, and one that people might not come to mind immediately. You know?
It's just where the rubber meets the road on a daily basis. These little conflicts that come up that you have to sort of think about, which discussions like this certainly can help you with.
Brings it up. Well, that's it for tonight. Now, coming up tomorrow, will today's students be tomorrow's priests and nuns? We'll hear what they have to say.
Meantime, remember, we are always online at currentsny.net, and you can always follow us on Twitter as well. That's at currentsny, and also become a fan on Facebook. That is just at Currents. Well, for all of us here at Currents, thank you so much for watching. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Have a great night.